We are so excited to have all of you here, and we're going to have a great conversation and learn a whole wonderful about a lot of really wonderful experiences that people are having on the ground related to agroecology. And we're really delighted that you can come here and learn with us and hear about all the amazing things that are happening. What I'd like to do first of all is just ask anybody who's speaking to speak next to the mic, because we're recording this online and we're also translating things, and it's much easier for everybody to hear you if you speak slowly and you speak close to the microphone. Okay? Anything else?
For those that require interpretation, there are two ways to access it. First is on your computer at cbd.interacto.com/listen, or there are QR codes, which I will pass around the room. Translation will be in English, Spanish, and French. All you need to do is enter the room code, which is COP4995, press listen, and then select your preferred language. And if you have any trouble, I will be here the whole time. You can come up to the side of the room and I will help you get the translation on your phone. Please use your headphones, lest we hear it in a whole bunch of different languages at the same time.
Thanks very much. And thanks to everybody for being here. We're really glad to be hosting this side event. And as you will find out, it's really been a collaboration between many, many different groups of people. And it's a preliminary effort on the part of this initiative. So what I'd like to do first of all is just provide some framing comments and to let you know that this side event brings forward the latest evidence in support of agroecology, with a strong focus on, of course, agricultural biodiversity within the framework of food sovereignty. And I think that that's a really important framing premise that we need to think about. And all of this, given our context, is relative to being a fundamental basis for a global biodiversity framework, and also as essential to the global biodiversity framework. Agroecology crosses mixed and diverse landscapes and can help avoid ineffective fortress conservation that has limited conservation impacts over the years, and in many situations can lead to the systemic violations of local community rights. Agroecology can help to reconnect humans and nature and bring them together as unified systems, and it also offers pathways for just and resilient food systems. It's really clear that without a strong focus on agroecology, our global targets for biodiversity conservation are bound to miss the mark. And just to provide you with some background statistics about how important this is, 3/4 of our biological diversity in food and agriculture has been destroyed over the last century. And this is due to the rapid expansion of industrial and inequitable farming models that homogenize our genetic basis, deforest and degrade the land, and rely extensively on external and polluting inputs to maintain artificial productive levels. This industrial food system relies on only 9 species of crops for more than 66% of the food that's eaten in the world. This is from a possible 6,000, more than 6,000. So clearly we're foreclosing our options by relying on so few species for our food. If we look at the animal food system, 29% of local breeds of livestock are now classified as being at risk of extinction, and nearly 1/3 of fish stocks are overfished, and more than half have reached their sustainable limits. This is clearly a really precarious food system with increasingly compromised biodiversity. And that's what we're here to talk about today, is what are some of the solutions going forward. Agricultural biodiversity is important, as the more options that we have in our food system to grow and harvest food, the more resilient that food system is. And there's compelling evidence that agroecological approaches offer viable pathways for this much needed transformation, as they focus on ecosystem diversity, agricultural biodiversity, and are deeply rooted in traditional knowledges and the foodways of Indigenous peoples and local communities. Interest in agroecology has been growing rapidly across many sectors and is now embraced by donor agencies, governments, research institutions, civil society organizations around the world. The approaches are gaining center stage as a way to address the interconnected biodiversity, ecological, food security, and health crises facing humanity today. Both the IPBES, the Global Assessment Report, and the IPCC Special Report underscore agroecology as an effective strategy for biodiversity conservation and sustainable use, and allows us to build multifunctional, resilient food systems. However, despite these strong affirmations in the international community, discussions at the CBD about the role of agroecology for biodiversity conservation and the sustainable use of genetic resources have been fraught with disagreement and disconnected from this growing momentum for agroecology globally. And despite the benefits of agricultural biodiversity, we're still trying to have a dedicated program of work and multiple decisions at the international level. It is being marginalized within the CBD negotiations. Agroecology and agricultural biodiversity are allowed and are largely absent, unfortunately, at this point in the proceedings from the GBF. And what we'd like to do is talk about today what the benefits of agroecology are, so that when people are in the rooms negotiating, they have really concrete examples that they can take forward with them about the benefits of agroecology, and also help people understand how important it is. As you can see up on the screen, these are the supporters that have brought this side event to fruition, in addition to the amazing speakers that we have in the room. So we'd just like to recognize and thank all the supporters for this initiative. And in the interest of time, we're going to jump right to our first speaker. We're very fortunate to have Camila Zepeda, the Director for Global Affairs at the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with us from today. Camila, thank you so much for joining us. She's also Mexico's Chief Climate and Biodiversity Negotiator. So we are very grateful for your time, and please take the floor.
Thank you very much. And as mentioned, because I am in negotiations, we will be taking this up later today. So everyone knows there will be a contact group, apparently 7:30 p.m. on agriculture, where we will be discussing that target. Well, as Mexico, we will push to have agroecology in there, but support is needed. So please come to the contact group, because we need to have voices there and we need to put pressure. So just having that announcement out there. But having said that, now going into the specifics and examples from Mexico. And also want to thank here our colleague Lauren Baker, which we've working together on an agroecology coalition. She'll probably explain better about it, but very happy that we're here, that we're showing some of our examples. And from Mexico, I mean, this is not a new issue. It's part of our indigenous people and local communities. For many years, we've been pioneers in agroecological practices for agroforestry systems, such as shade-grown coffee, cocoa, polycultural systems. We have the traditional milpa. I don't think there's a translation for that. I don't know if the translator can say, but this for maize, I mean, that's like a traditional ancestral sort of way to produce self-consumption of basic grains such as corn, beans, fruits, vegetable, of course, chile. No? A lot of these products that are originally from our country. So we've been doing this ancestral practices, and that up to this day, we have those systems in place. We have more than 68 indigenous peoples that use these practices, and so we can show a way that is sustainable. But we have now to recognize that there's a lot of areas of opportunity to scale up that traditional knowledge, that science-based agroecology, to the commercial agriculture. And we need to sort of generate that environment so that those good agricultural practices can be on a larger scale and not be considered just sort of isolated cases that is more like nomadic agriculture. We need to make it mainstream, sort of say. So from the government of Mexico, we have various public policies, both from our Ministry of Agriculture and of our Ministry of Environment. They're pushing the concept of agroecology within our agri-food systems and production chains to gradually adopt agroecology practices for sustainability without compromising productivity. We know business are business, and we need to show them that this is a cost-efficient way to produce and that it's scalable. So we are putting all of our knowledge to that and making sure that there's a conservation and rational use of resources, of living soil, of our genetic resources. We want to make sure that we have those essential pillars to guarantee long-term production, affordability, and so on. So, I mean, we do have an enormous responsibility, but we need to work together. We need more partners. We need the academia on our side and civil society and research development centers to make sure that we can effectively scale up those efforts and try to have a public campaign of information to have awareness. Consumers are very important on how our producers deliver the product. So if, for example, in climate change, we have that awareness of the 1.5 target and that we need to address those issues, then consumers also sort of upheld the private sector to higher standards. We can do this for agroecology. We can make sure that there's a distinct label on products that are coming from these sustainable practices, and that consumers demand that those products come from agroecology practices. So also we need public awareness, we need a consumer's responsibility, and that needs a lot of information efforts across the board. But we want to put out there that we have a lot of ancestral campesinos, indigenous peoples coming forward, and that we're very happy to join all of these coalitions and efforts to make sure that we are sustainable for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for setting the stage for us. That is so interesting. And it's, Camila, you raised a really good point that I think is worth emphasizing, and that's that not only do food systems help when they're done right to preserve and protect and halt biodiversity loss, but they also help us address climate change, because the industrial food system now contributes about a third of greenhouse gas emissions to the climate crisis. So there are multiple benefits that can be realized from agroecology. So thank you so much for being with us, and we hope you can stay as long as possible, but we understand if you need to scoot out. So thank you for being here. I now have the pleasure of introducing our panelists. First, I'd like to introduce Sabrina Mazangila. She's from the African Center for Biodiversity. She's a researcher and advocacy officer at the ACB, and she's really passionate. I just had the pleasure of meeting Sabrina, but I'm learning how passionate she is about food and ecological justice, food sovereignty, and the advancement of peasants' rights in agricultural and environmental spheres. She has a vast experience in analysis, advocacy, and campaigns against draconian seed laws on the African continent, has been supporting the ACB around biosafety, farmer seed systems, and agricultural biodiversity on the African continent for the past 8 years. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you now, Sabrina, and if you don't mind speaking for about 5 minutes, that would be great. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Alison, and thank you so much for being part of this panel. So I'm just going to go straight to my my talk, and I think as we're speaking about agroecology and food systems, and narrowing it down, because the agricultural biodiversity is vast and it deals with a lot of diversity across plants, across animals, across different species, microorganisms. But when it comes to crop, seed is quite an important aspect, particularly for agricultural biodiversity. And I think for us, importantly, would be the promotion of in situ and on-farm conservation, but also as this sort of helps to, this needs urgent attention and integration. I think Alison has given us a background on how, industrial farming has devastated, increased the declining biodiversity. And we see this also particularly with the push for industrial agriculture, the push for corporate seed, and this sort of marginalizes and disregards, farmer managed seed systems, which, as the previous speaker has mentioned, we have our traditional seed, indigenous seed, that need also to be, to be enhanced and protected and supported. And we know that the co-evolution of farmer knowledge and seed has been taking place for around 10,000 years and forms the foundation of all the seed that is produced in changing climatic conditions, such as genetically diverse, and therefore seed is, adaptable and indispensable. And seed is also essential for breeding, and farmer seed systems actually make food systems more resilient against climate, pests, pathogens, because the more diverse a food system is, the more dynamic the global ecosystem is. So you see this interrelationship between, agricultural biodiversity and biodiversity in its whole. And also the higher chances that any one species has a particular trait that enables it to adapt to a changing environment. And farmer seed systems are integral to, world's genetic and cultural diversity, and that's, as I mentioned, the foundation for all seed systems. Unfortunately, with the push for industrial agriculture, now we're now seeing our laws that are being framed in a way that they push for homogeneous, uniform, certified, high-yielding commercial crops. And as Alison mentioned, we are narrowing that diversity to only 9 species, 6,000 crops, whereas there is quite a diverse variety of crops or seed that we can use. So this is drastically diminishing seed and crop diversity. And when you also look at the kind of the kind of laws that our governments are not actually pushing for. For example, we have the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources, which actually recognizes the role of smallholder farmers. We have the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Peasants that actually recognizes the role of farmers in enhancing their seed systems and in the conservation, sustainable use, but these are not being taken into consideration. I'll give an example. In Africa, none of our countries, very few countries, are actually recognizing this other legislation from the internet, like, for example, the Treaty on Europe. And this is actually, we see this is a delink between the CBD and other, international bodies. So, as Alison mentioned, there was a program of work on agriculture biodiversity within the CBD, but this has been separated. So we see this disjointed, synergies or collaboration or cooperation between these two distinct bodies, and this is quite a huge challenge. I think the biggest worry is for the GBF is the lack of agricultural biodiversity not being addressed in the framework. There is, I think, question whether Target 4, which deals with, sort of has a language on in situ conservation, but it's not explicitly on food and crops, if how this is, it's going to deal with the issue around in situ conservation, but it also has to go beyond in situ conservation, and to protect centers of origin and crop diversity. But Target 10 doesn't mention this, and we know that there has to be like synergy among all the targets within the GBF. So the need to, when we talk about the shifts from, we need to shift from what we have, the current food systems that we have, to more biodiverse agroecological production systems, and farmer managed seed systems is inextricably linked to this. because such systems require, genetically diverse seed, which is in the hands of smallholder farmers. And lastly, I just want to finish by saying that this also goes in recognition, the need to recognize, of course, the shift to move away to agroecological production, but also this has to go hand in hand with the rights, recognizing, supporting, and promoting farmer managed systems and farmers' rights to ensure the future of agricultural biodiversity and biodiversity more broadly. The rights enshrined within the UNDROP, I think Tammy will speak more about that, is, UNDROP has been recognized, I think, as we saw in the inclusion in the GBF, particularly in bee-based section. But it's bee-based is just being set as it's being pushed aside where everything is being dumped there. But it needs to be actually integrated within the whole GBF. And indicators must measure how agricultural biodiversity is increasing on farm, the interaction with crop, wild relative, and broader biodiversity downstream of agricultural areas, protection of centers of origin, crop diversity, protection of smallholder farmers, farmer seed systems. So I think I'll end there, and maybe some of the colleagues will speak more about the rights and integration of protecting the rights of smallholder farmers, the enhancing agricultural biodiversity as key and integral to promoting agroecology.
Sabrina, thank you so much for laying the groundwork. Much appreciated. I'm going to invite, just because it seems like a natural segue now, based on what Sabrina was saying, Tammy Jonas to take the floor. Tammy is an agroecologist in principle and practice. She farms heritage breed large black pigs, cattle, garlic, and garlic as well with her bricoleur husband. So many talents in the household. And they work the land on the unceded lands of the Jaja Wurrung. She is, I'm sorry if I said that incorrectly. She is undertaking a PhD at the University of Western Australia on the biodiverse and decolonial practices and politics of small-scale farmers and the impacts of the state on their efforts towards an agroecological transition in Australia. So she's perfectly suited to address all of the issues. So over to you, Tammy. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Alison. I'm actually going to slightly change what I was originally going to do because I've realized the best thing to do as a farmer is kind of paint a picture of all the things we're talking about from a policy perspective. So as Alison said, I do farm on the unceded lands of the Jara and would like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and also to all Indigenous peoples present here today. And thank you for your thousands and thousands of years of custodianship that we're trying to learn from. And in terms of agroecology and practices, I guess on our farm we raise cattle and pigs and garlic, and we also have we grow our own heritage breed wheat for our bread, and we'd like to eventually sell a little bit of that. We grow chilies for ourselves in a greenhouse we've built from recycled materials, and we'd like to sell a little bit of that. So we're going backwards in our journey from selling food initially and being able to feed ourselves from that to now growing food for ourselves and being able to sell the surplus. And so the point also I'd like to make, we're not unique at all. We're following traditions that are many thousands of years older than we are, and we're borrowing from lots of traditions and trying to acknowledge those things. We're also a community-supported agriculture farm, so we have 80 household members. All of our food is pre-sold. We have a 20-year waiting list. We don't have to sell anything. And the only reason I maintain a waiting list is because in the spirit of agroecology and degrowth, when people come to us and they want food from us and we say we're sold out, but there's this farm just 5 Ks down the road. There's this one 8 Ks down the road. And they use the butcher shop that we built on our farm to also process their meat to then sell to their CSA members. And so although we were the only pig farmer in our district when we started, there are now 5 within about 15 kilometers of us. And building that value chain infrastructure that's so critical to peasants has been a major thing to help others then also be able to grow pigs and cattle and sheep and process them on farm. We're now working on a micro abattoir, so we'll be able to slaughter on farm as well, and that will be able to provide services for up to 15 local farms. And that's a not-for-profit part of the business. We don't want that to be part of how we earn our money. that will just be covering costs, because if you covered that processing part of the system with nobody trying to profit from it, just actually pay for labor, like our own labor and the packaging, etc., then you could start to really heal the food system. Now, this is all embedded in a community that in the 12 years we've been there has grown and grown in the number of small-scale farmers and other associated kind of industries, if you like. There's other makers and bakers that have arisen because of the growth of small-scale producers. So we're literally seeing that transition in real time. We have had a lot of farmers, young people come and learn farming on our farm, and then we've helped them find places on other local farms. One that has been market gardening very nearby to us, Tumpanyeri, a young Indigenous farmer, and his farming partner Rex are moving back onto our farm to then have access to that land at no rent, because we own the land and we shouldn't be able to capitalize on the fact that we own land and they don't. So making space available and having a community that works in another solidarity economy is part of the system. And then as a community, because we're so kind of collectivized, we also do a lot of political lobbying. And this is a really important part of agroecology, is that we're collectivized to lobby for the policy reform we need at the local, the state, the federal, and here at the global levels. And we can only do that by sharing that farmer-to-farmer knowledge about what's needed, constantly listening. It's also by, as you increase the diversity on your farm, you throw yourself at every level of regulations that the government has available to you. So we also milk a couple of cows, and we'd like to build a fromagerie. So I think we nearly have every kind of food that you can produce that has a difficult regulatory burden, to understand those problems and change them. And we have had a number of significant wins in Australia. So I think I've painted enough picture, and I'll stop there. And that others, and I would just say, by the way, even in Australia, we use UN drop as a political tool in a country that is not a fan of the idea of peasants, agroecology, or food sovereignty. And we still use it because it is a human rights declaration that you can use as a positioning tool, if not an actual legal tool in a place like Australia.
That's fantastic, Tammy, and thank you for making those vital connections that we're creating now between declarations like UN DRIP and UN DROP. And that really shows us how we could use the Global Biodiversity Framework, if it's written the right way, to really help advance agroecology in the future. So that's a really important point. I'm kind of going all over the map here. Sol Vincente, would you be able to speak next? I'd like to introduce you first. Originally from the Zapotec indigenous peoples of the Oaxacan of Zaragoza in the state of Oaxaca, Mexico, Saul is a member of the board of directors of the International Indian Treaty Council, the organization secretary of the Unit of the Indigenous and Peasant Force, a member of the coordinator committee of the International Planning Committee for Food Sovereignty, IPC, and secretary of the Assembly of Indigenous Peoples for Food Sovereignty. So we really welcome your comments, Saul, and please, you have the floor.
Adiós, Ibichaka, Izanaka. Videdushkishe, Iraka, ni original aritiganda weniana to the Ija, Chupachona di Ijasi. De Chicasacanu, Dani Gichilayune, Dani Casquichino, Diosquilla Pelatubichana Bizanca. Muy buenas tardes, muchísimas gracias a quienes han organizado este evento y que me han invitado a participar con ustedes para compartir algunas reflexiones en torno a esta problemática que estamos enfrentando en la COP y en nuestros territorios. Y efectivamente, hemos señalado que las dificultades de avanzar hacia un marco sobre la biodiversidad, un marco global que atienda los alcances hacia después del año 2020, bueno, ya perdimos 2 años. Cuando en los documentos sobre biodiversidad y agricultura, ustedes los pueden ver, están ahí públicos, tienen encorchetadas todas las referencias sobre agroecología. Y tampoco se hacen referencia a los derechos humanos. Y entonces nosotros nos hemos preguntado, ¿cuáles serían entonces las propuestas de transformación para evitar la degradación de los suelos, la contaminación? ¿Y cómo se respetarán los derechos de los pueblos indígenas a nuestros territorios, a nuestros recursos y bienes naturales. Como lo señaló mi hermana Tammy y mi hermana Camila, en México sembramos a través del sistema Milpa. Y bueno, quiero compartirles que justamente en este último ciclo agrícola que acaba de terminar, nosotros sembramos en nuestra cooperativa un sistema Milpa con un maíz específico, endémico de nuestra región. Es la variedad que se adaptó a los fuertes vientos que tenemos en nuestra región, que son entre 100 a 120 kilómetros por hora. Y esa es la variedad que se adaptó ahí, pero su calidad nutritiva es tan alta como cualquiera de los otros maíces de las otras regiones en mi país. Y en medio de la crisis que estamos viviendo a nivel mundial, también esto impactó. Hay muchos campesinos que no han podido transitar a la agroecología y estaban esperando la llegada de fertilizantes químicos. Lo que llegó fue bastante caro. Y nosotros demostramos en nuestra producción que a través del sistema Milpa y a través de las prácticas agroecológicas, en primer lugar, nuestros costos de inversión fueron del 50% menos que si hubiéramos estado utilizando o seguimos utilizando los fertilizantes de síntesis químicas. En segundo lugar, logramos demostrar en un ciclo que no es de riego, es el ciclo de temporal, prácticamente todos mis otros hermanos que sembraron en este ciclo sin fertilizantes químicos o con algo de fertilizantes químicos que llegó ya muy tarde, la sequía los alcanzó. Todas las parcelas se secaron. Y las nuestras, que tenemos en nuestra cooperativa, logró resistir la sequía o el retraso de las lluvias, logró resistir después la caída fuerte de las lluvias y los vientos que se presentaron, y se logró demostrar que incrementó su nivel de productividad. Es decir, en nuestra región prácticamente nuestra variedad de maíz no puede exceder de 2 hectáreas porque es muy pequeño, de 2 toneladas por hectárea, perdón. Y sin embargo, ahora en la cooperativa, con la transición agroecológica que han hecho varios de mis hermanos indígenas campesinos, lograron incrementar de 500 kilos por hectárea a una tonelada, 200 kilos por hectárea en este ciclo que es de temporal. Vamos a volver ahora en el ciclo de riego para demostrar que en un ambiente más controlado podremos desarrollar mejor nuestras prácticas agroecológicas. Y por eso, estamos documentando todo esto porque estamos demostrando que es posible, que es más barato, que es más sano. Lo que no es posible, que siga encorsetado la agroecología en este marco mundial de biodiversidad post-2020. Pues, ¿qué vamos a hacer? Es lo que decimos en México, ¿no? Es una forma de decir de nosotros. Y ustedes, no solamente que está encorsetado agroecología, no se hace referencia a los territorios. Si vamos a buscar desde la perspectiva de cómo mejorar las condiciones de nuestros suelos, desde nuestra perspectiva de pueblos indígenas, no solamente se trata de trabajar con las tierras en donde se siembra, sino con los territorios, porque a partir de la concepción que tenemos de nuestros territorios es como está establecido en el convenio 169 de la Organización Internacional del Trabajo. Es el hábitat total en donde nuestros pueblos desarrollan su cultura. Es donde se demuestra la relación especial, material y espiritual que nuestros pueblos tienen con la tierra, con la madre tierra. Si ese marco no está dentro de este marco, entonces va a ser difícil. Y ustedes pueden ver en el documento del CBD 15/2 del tema 24, en donde se está desarrollado los términos de diversidad biológica y agricultura, no hay una referencia a territorios, no hay una referencia a derechos, dice de los instrumentos internacionales pero no habla de los instrumentos internacionales en materia de derechos humanos. Entonces, no estamos hablando del derecho humano a la alimentación. Por lo tanto, está excluido. Tampoco hace referencia a uno de los espacios internacionales más inclusivos que existe en el ámbito multilateral, que es el Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria Mundial. Tiene resoluciones de políticas desde hace 10 años y ninguna de ellas está considerada ni en la introducción, ni en los propósitos y objetivos, ni en los marcos de referencia que tiene. Otro aspecto que tampoco toman en cuenta en el documento sobre biodiversidad y agricultura, se hace referencia a la ciencia, a las técnicas y al conocimiento, pero no hace referencia a los conocimientos indígenas. Entonces, de pronto encontramos que en algunas partes se hace referencia a los pueblos indígenas, pero en los documentos en donde están los fundamentos filosóficos, teóricos, conceptuales y políticos deberían de estar también, y sin embargo no están, y cuando están encorchetados después de 4 años de debates desde la última COP. Entonces, tampoco se hace referencia a los sistemas normativos de los pueblos indígenas. Es decir, a la hora de impulsar en el marco de los propósitos y los objetivos, se hace referencia a muchas cosas y al final dice, teniendo en cuenta las circunstancias nacionales. Estamos de acuerdo, hay que tener en cuenta las circunstancias nacionales, pero en los territorios de nuestros pueblos indígenas tiene que tomarse en cuenta los sistemas normativos de los pueblos indígenas, si no, no estamos hablando de las prácticas y del sujeto del derecho. Por lo tanto, hace falta asumir una visión más integral en la introducción, en los ámbitos de aplicación, etcétera, y sobre todo en las acciones que se tienen que llevar a cabo. Por esa razón, llamamos la atención, además, que en el Target 3, en la meta 3, está igualmente todo encorchetado, pero se está haciendo énfasis en las cuestiones de las áreas protegidas, y entonces en el texto dice que es una porción que sea estrictamente protegida. Eso, en el concepto de áreas protegidas, puede significar la expulsión de las personas, de las poblaciones, de las comunidades que ahí habiten. Y eso no lo podemos aceptar, porque entonces las zonas de conservación mayor en el mundo, lo han dicho ustedes, los investigadores, etcétera, se encuentran en territorio de los pueblos indígenas. Y si eso en el 30%, 30 por 30, lo van a integrar como las áreas protegidas para este marco mundial, nos van a expulsar de ahí. Y eso va a significar el despojo de nuestras tierras y territorios, y no puede ser. Entonces, encontramos bastante preocupación en el proceso, y termino con eso nada más. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. That was a very impassioned explanation of why place-based agriculture and agroecology are so important, and why we need to include Indigenous knowledge, and why that's critical. So thank you so much, Saul, and we'll hope to have more space for you to talk in a few minutes. I'd like to welcome Marian Bassi Orowuje to the floor. Marian is a lawyer and environmental, human and food rights advocate. She's a deputy executive director in the foremost Nigerian advocacy NGO, Environmental Rights Action and Friends of the Earth in Nigeria, and she's also the coordinator of Friends of the Earth, Africa's Food Sovereignty Program. In addition, she is on Friends of the Earth Steering Committee for Food Sovereignty, and she's focused, as you can tell from all the committees that she leads and serves on food sovereignty as a campaigner and a frontline activist against the onslaught of biotechnology companies and their local agents on the seeds and food systems of Nigeria and Africa. Thank you so much for being with us, Marianne. Please take the floor.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I want us to take a minute and think about your favorite food. Where does it come from? Who grows that food? Why do you like it? I'm going to share some, I'm here to talk about the 4 solutions and what is happening in Africa. Think about when you go home, like in Africa, we have our grandmothers, our aunties, and you think, oh, I'm going home, grandma is going to cook for me food I like. Maybe I want something they call cassava, eba, and soup. And then suddenly, some people are coming to say, that cassava you are eating is not good for you. It has high starch content. It's very starchy. And you forget, I don't eat that cassava alone. We eat it with something we call soup. That soup has everything in it. There's vegetables, there's meat, there's shrimps, and it's a balanced diet. You come and you are saying you want to add nutrients. I mean, there's a high, how do I call this? How does my friend call this thing? Nutritionism. You want to add nutrients to cassava so that it's no longer high, doesn't have high starch content. It will have protein. It will have other, but that is not you've contaminated my food. You've distorted my food. You've raped my food because you've destroyed it. So that is what is happening in Africa. They come in and they're telling us, we want to genetically modify your food to give it high contents. We want to bio-fortify, big names, your food so you can have nutrients. Who tells you I don't have nutrients? I eat them some other way. So there's a whole lot of false solutions being promoted from outside, wrong messages, wrong narratives. And the worst thing is they're not talking to us. You're not even talking to the people who produce this food. You've not asked for their consent. Food in Africa is about culture. There is a whole lot of spirituality involved in it. Culture, connections, so many things. In everything we eat food. Burials, birth, marriages, gatherings. In everything we eat food and we celebrate food. It's a culture. There's a lot of involved in that thing. And then you come in, you want to put a price to it. That is what is happening, because when you come in and you want to distort that food, you're destroying a culture of a people. So this is what is happening. And then you come in with policies that do not favor the people. You come in with you want to symbio, gene drives, GMOs, and all that. And you're eroding a whole culture, in different levels and different forms. And for us, we feel this is totally wrong and is not acceptable. I come from a community. So if you go to COP, tell the people they have an opportunity to rewrite the things they are doing wrongly. They can get it right. The survival of our food system depends on what they do, the things they write, the things they say, the things they want to move forward. I mean, if you are thinking about people, I mean, everybody here want to save the people, want to save our food, but then things have been done wrong. You're not listening to the people. They want to be heard. They want to be there saying, we want our food to be produced in the way that we love it, the way that we let it. Is called food sovereignty. Agroecology, it has always existed, but I'm happy it's now coming out. So these people are saying food has to be it has to nourish our bodies. In Africa now, in Nigeria, where I come from, there's a spike in people getting sick. And we are thinking it's what has been done to our food. Because historically, people were not, food was medicine. Food was a whole lot of things, but there's a lot of tinkering with our food that has caused a lot of problems for our people. So we are saying, listen to our people. Listen to what they are saying. We are saying that agroecology, the way we are growing our food, can sustain the world. It can feed us. It's medicine. Don't contaminate it. Don't pollute it. Let us develop a consciousness where people are listening to, and you listen to the people. You don't just gather us here and then you go and then take a decision without listening to us, without even hearing what we have to say. And you don't have our consent. You don't have our permission. You don't have a right to do it. And the people that matter are not respected. It's a violation. You're not violating their rights. They're not respected. And the farmers feel that they are not respected because these are the people who produce food and they are telling you, we know what they are doing. We might not be in a fanciful room with ACs, but we know what we have. We've evolved over time. This knowledge, this traditional knowledge, have passed on from generation to, and it has evolved. And agroecology, it's been there. So we are saying, let food be produced in a sustainable, healthy, culturally appropriate way. If anything, COVID taught us is that we are self-reliant. People did not die in Africa as people suspected they would because people were eating healthily and they were being sustained. So I come with a message from Africa. Please listen to us. Put a brakes to all these modifications, gene drives, and begin to rewrite things for the survival of our food system, for the people we are saying we want to protect and respect the farmers, respect agroecology principles, respect our food sovereignty. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Marianne. You painted a very vivid picture for everybody by asking them to think about their favorite food, and then you told us about the circumstances that you're fighting for, and that really is so inspirational. Thank you very much. I'm excited to have all of you talk to each other soon, but first I'm going to ask Lauren Baker from the Global Alliance on the Future of Food to go next. Lauren has more than 20 years of experience leading cross-sectoral research, policy, and advocacy for resilient, equitable food systems in nonprofit, academic, business, policy, and philanthropic contexts. And she's currently the director at the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, which is an alliance of philanthropic foundations working to transform the global food system. And this is just one of the things that they're helping to support. So thanks for being here, Lauren. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Alison, and thanks to everybody. It's been such a fantastic collaboration to organize this side event together. And, Ferris, we were talking about this yesterday, it's just blossomed in terms of the people who are involved. And just want to thank Alison's leadership as the UNESCO Chair on Biodiversity and Food Systems. I'd also like to recognize that we're on unceded Mohawk Nation territory, and I want to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of this land. I'm Canadian. I live in Toronto, and so just want to recognize that we're here in Montreal on unceded territory. And one of the things that the Haudenosaunee teachings have made me think deeply about, which are relevant to this conversation, is the idea of all our relations. So maybe we could bring that forward into the negotiations over the days ahead. The Global Alliance for the Future of Food has been working on agroecology for over a decade. And so, this side event is a part of a long arc of work for us. And we've done that in partnership with philanthropic foundations and other partners. And so I just wanted to provide some context for why we feel that agroecology is at the heart of food systems transformation and resilience, and why we're engaging collectively as a philanthropic community in global fora. Indeed, Alison, like you said, we are living in a time of very precarious food systems. And so the principles of agroecology, which are recognized widely by scientists, by governments, by social movements, by farmers, by UN institutions, provide guidance for us in terms of how to think about food systems in a fundamentally different way. And Camilla, I wanted to say that, of course, the Agroecology Coalition was founded on those principles, founded on the good work that came out of the Committee on World Food Security, and think about those 10 elements that have been agreed upon, and the 13 principles as well. So this is one reason that agroecology for us is very important. Also, like we've heard in the panel, agroecology is about place-based ecological and biocultural practices that work with nature rather than against it, promoting gender equity, resilience, social values, and appropriate resource use. And so we've heard about that already on the panel today. And it's also grounded in participatory and rights-based processes, which are is very essential to the work that our members and many of the people in this room are doing. Agroecology also halts and reverses biodiversity loss. And I just wanted to say, Sabrina, how clearly you articulated that in terms of the way that agroecology can protect and strengthen agricultural biodiversity, and how we need to bring that back into the center of these negotiations as well. And then finally, but my final point on this is that agroecology also articulates an inclusive transformation process. And this for us is very important. It supports a transformation both from subsistence agriculture and industrial agriculture to diversified agroecological practices. And our members are supporting agroecology, regenerative agriculture and regenerative approaches and indigenous foodways as part of an inclusive transformation grounded in agroecology. And so really, I think what we've been hearing today on the panel is that agroecology upholds the 3 CBD pillars of conservation, sustainable use, and equity, and contributes to this overarching goal of the CBD, which is to sustain life on Earth. And that's what we're here to do over the next week or 2 weeks. We know that agroecology and sustainable food systems indeed remain contested. And so we asked ourselves, our members, we asked ourselves as philanthropic foundations to think about the evidence that can be brought to bear when we're thinking about agroecology. Actually, Saul, you did a great job of painting a very clear picture of the evidence and think about the diverse evidence that's required to for the transformation that we need. And in that process, which resulted in some work called the Politics of Knowledge report, we elevated some questions that hold back transformation. These relate to the kind of narrative, the narrative shift that needs to happen. So can these approaches, can agroecology solve the climate, biodiversity, and soil crisis? Can these approaches accelerate transformation? Can these approaches feed the world? Can they provide meaningful livelihoods? And finally, can they be scaled? And we did some work, some collective work with partners to help understand the evidence and the diversity of evidence that's out there. And I don't want to spend too much time going through that. But indeed, despite the opposition, there is ample evidence. And agroecological approaches are really, despite this opposition, gaining center stage as the way to address the interconnected biodiversity, ecological, food security, and health crises facing humanity today. So I'll just end by outlining a few opportunities that I see ahead, opportunities in the short term over the next week for the Global Biodiversity Framework. Really an opportunity again to elevate and insert agroecology and agricultural biodiversity within the text. They're largely absent right now. We're really thinking together collectively about Target 10, integrating language into Target 10 about agroecological approaches. For me, I'm watching Target 15 as well, which would require businesses and financial institutions to assess and disclose their impacts. So addressing industrial impacts of industrial agriculture and their dependencies on ecological systems and processes. And I think as well, there's an opportunity to think about how fisheries and marine communities need to be included in the GBF as key to sustainable use and conservation. There are longer-term opportunities as well to support and strengthen social movements that are leading this work and to strengthen fair and agroecological markets, which are so central to our food systems. And we need policies, of course, and investments that support biodiverse and adaptable food systems, and governments need to align their domestic food policy with their biodiversity goals. I do think there is a need to align as well the national biodiversity strategies and action plans with the nationally determined contributions and climate action plans. This is a really central opportunity. We need coherence and find synergies between these agreements and these action pathways. And the Agroecology Coalition is a great opportunity as well that's bringing over 40 governments together and other actors to advance agroecology. So with that, I'll end and thank everybody again for participating in this side event, this conversation. Agroecology shows a dynamic multifunctionality that can support communities who are experiencing and overcoming global crises, converging global crises, and is really essential to repairing our relationship with nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lauren, for giving us those very short-term focused ideas and also what we can work towards in the future. Thank you very much for participating. It was so amazing to have you with us. And best of luck in the negotiations. We'll see you at 7:30. Everybody has to go and be in the room, okay? Okay. We have someone with us, Georgina Catacora Vargas, who would like to make some comments now. And then I think what we'll do is open up the floor to questions. Before I do that, though, I'd just like to acknowledge the presence of some parties in the room. And we thank you for being here with us to share your, to listen to what we're saying and to support this side event. In addition to having had Mexico with us, we've had Switzerland, Germany, the EU, Finland, Mexico, and if I'm not mentioning anybody, I apologize. And we'd also like to make a special call out to Elizabeth May from the Green Party of Canada. We're delighted to have you with us as well. So thank you very much. So with that said, I would now like to turn to Georgina for her comments. So thank you for being with us, Georgina. We're really glad. Oh, there you are. I'm sorry. You were over there and now you're over there. You're like a magic person. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? No, you can't hear me. Can you hear me now? Is it better? No. Sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah, sorry. I'm Georgina Catacora. I participate under the CBD processes with my affiliation of the academic peasant units of the Bolivian Catholic University. But here I am sitting representing the Latin American Scientific Society of Agroecology, SOCLA. And thanks, Alison, for giving me the floor. I would like to make 3 quick points on all the many things that we can say about agroecology. The first thing I would like to say is that, as you may recall, the IPBES has identified 5 direct causes of loss of biodiversity. 5. Out of those 5, agroecology can address and prevent 4, which are land use change, pollution, direct exploitation, and climate change. This latter not only as addressing it with a mitigation approach, but most importantly from adaptation approach. As Lauren was saying, there is plenty of evidence of that. In this side event, there is no time for that, but I would like to say that there is scientific evidence that is produced by citizens and civil society organizations, and most importantly, there is evidence on the territories that still needs to be documented. And why it's not documented? Because there is little, or the support that we have, like for instance, the organizations working with the Global Food Alliance, is minimal in comparison to what our agriculture in total receives and in comparison to harmful subsidies that industrial agriculture receives. So what is happening on the ground about agroecology is thanks to the effort to those who are committed to a healthier life and ecosystems. So if we are searching for arguments in targets related to agriculture and sustainable production and consumption, please, the delegates who are here, let's remember that agroecology can address at least 4 out of the 5 direct drivers of biodiversity loss. And then, as also Lauren was saying, but this has been disputed in relation to scale and productivity. And agroecology has proven to be productive in terms of very strict hard indicators in a scale such as 21 square meters. I'm saying that because this is the artisanal greenhouse that in peri-urban people in my country, Bolivia, produce 3x7 artisanal greenhouses, producing enough food. They provide at least 60% of the vegetable food that a family of 4 people require. This is food sovereignty, and this is also food security. So the issue of scale, the issue of productivity has been resolved by agroecology. So that was my second point. And my third point is that, also mentioned as before, because agroecology adapts, particularly to those who are in vulnerable situations, agroecology is crucial for a human rights-based approach because it contributes to the realization of social, economic, political, environmental rights. I can mention some. The right to traditional knowledge and cultural expressions, the right to have access to natural resources and to use them in a sustainable manner, the right to genetic resources and seeds, the right to food, the right to health, the right to a health environment, etc., etc., all of them reflected in numerous international instruments of human rights. And so that the United Nations declarations on farmers' rights and other people working in the rural areas specifically mention agroecology and the duty that the states have promoting agroecology for sustainable use of ecosystems, for sustainable livelihoods, and as a strategy for protection of traditional knowledge, innovation, and practices. So we cannot neglect agroecology anymore given the crisis that we are. And this is particularly important for youth and women, creating also scenarios for them to realize their social and economic rights and also inclusion. Being said that, I would like to say that sustainable agriculture is not enough for promoting agroecology in the context of the GBF. We need to be very explicit to say agroecology because agroecology has particular attributes, which is being biodiverse. We are not talking about biologically managed monocrops. We are talking about biologically diverse fields and landscapes that accordingly restore and enhance ecosystem functions. This is what we are talking about in this fora. That is also very relevant in light of climate change. Please allow me to give an example of something that I saw 2 weeks ago in the fields of peasants in my country. A agroforestry system where apples is the main crop but produces 70 other crops requires 5 hours to be completely flooded, 5 hours of heavy rain to be completely flooded, while the neighbor needs 15 minutes. That shows us how resilient it is to climate change. The same plot requires irrigation under drought every month, and the neighbor requires every 3 days. We are working, documenting those experiences because once again, there is evidence. And something else, if you may allow me, is that the GBF needs clear indicators on agroecology. Otherwise, agroecology will be still invisible without showing its actual contribution at many levels as it is multifunctional, as Lauren was said. I'm sorry for taking so long, but thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much, Georgina. That's a really important intervention, and we're very glad to have you share your wealth of knowledge with us. So thank you so much for being here, too. I think what I'm going to do now, if I can have the indulgence of the panelists, is to ask for 2 questions from the audience. It's going to be really hard to figure out where those questions should come from. If you could introduce yourself, please, and tell us where you're from, your affiliation, that would be great. And then after that, we're very lucky to have Marie-Christine here from Agropolis, and she will be providing us with some closing comments. So thank you very much. And are there any questions from the floor? Literally from the floor. We have a packed room.
Hello. I am Rosario Ortiz from the University of Sherbrooke here in Quebec. I agree totally with the last intervention, And my question is related with how do you see the possibility that the GRULAC region, group, support the agroecological language in Target 10? And then my second question is related with Target 18 on subsidies of the agriculture, industrial agriculture. And then finally, the indicators associated with agroecology is something very, very important to introduce in this GBF.
Is there anybody else on the panel who would like to take that question, or should we give you a chance to think and move on? Sorry, you're welcome to answer, Georgino, if you want.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me? I have problems, people listen to me, so okay, if you can hear me. Thank you very much for addressing those questions. Well, it will be too risky to say or to try to foresee what countries will do. I'm a former negotiator, so I'm very, very cautious on those things. So I just would like to say that on the ground, there are many countries in the Latin American and the Caribbean region who have in place policies and national legislations that are very supportive of agroecology with specific agroecological instruments and other instruments that are complementary in relation to biodiversity, forest, food, and health, because agroecology is not only an agricultural issue. How to push forward that? We hope, we trust that countries are going to be faithful with their national legislations and what countries on the ground and the local, the communities in the ground request. So I'm sorry, I cannot say more than that in this, but I am able to share my personal opinion later.
Sounds like you two are having coffee.
And in relation to indicators that, for instance, help us to visualize the percentage of public funding addressed to agroecology will be very good. Like the percentage or the area devoted from the whole agricultural land to agroecology. Also, the area restored ecosystems, not only terrestrial, but also internal, I'm sorry for the word, I don't know if this water ecosystem, not marine, but more in the inland water-related ecosystem, thank you very much, are restored through agroecological management, for instance. That is could be another very important. Also, if we can think not only this is the GBF and we need to think about that, but for instance, if we start thinking women who are finding job opportunities through agroecology, that's a very important indicator too. So we need to be creative. I've been in the workshop on monitoring, and there is a common say that we don't have experience, there is no information, so we cannot include certain indicators. Precisely is because that's why we have to include certain indicators to fill in the gaps. So just to mention that lack of information or experience should not prevent to put the right indicators in the GBF.
Absolutely. And I know that the Global Alliance has done some really groundbreaking work in that area in trying to, and the work that we're doing at the UNESCO Chair tries to bring to life the place-based indicators that are needed to measure progress in things like agroecology. So I don't know, Lauren, if you would like to speak to that, or if we should take another question. What do you prefer?
Well, just very briefly, because this is actually some work that the coalition, the Agroecology Coalition, is taking up related to tracking investments in agroecology and using the principles to do so. And then also what I would call the progressive realization of agroecological policies in country and having an exchange around that too. So I think that can be very instructive, and that work needs to be continued and invested in and of itself. So I'll just leave it there.
Thanks very much, Lauren, and thanks, Georgina. We'll take one more question for now. If we have a few minutes at the end, we can have a few more questions, but please go ahead.
Thanks very much. And actually, I will be quite brief. My name is Selim Louafi. I'm Deputy Director for Research and Strategy at CIRAD in Montpellier, in France.
Bienvenue.
Thank you. And CIRAD is the French Agricultural Research and International Cooperation Organization that works on sustainable development in tropical and Mediterranean region. And actually, agroecology is one of our 6 research priority, together with One Health or adaptation to climate change. And I just wanted to point that in addition to all what has been said, and which I fully agree, I would add also that the transformative power of agroecology in the way research conceives its role, as it's no longer about providing solution to others from a kind of top-down engineering mode based on evidence coming from controlled experiment, but it's rather a much more humble position in which research is done in real condition with real people in support of collective learning process, and in which research is just one of the knowledge provider. So I guess this is, I think, a very also interesting way to also transform the way research could provide benefit to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And our next speaker is Marie-Christine Cormier-Salem from the Agropolis Foundation. And I think you stole some of her thunder, but not 100% sure, but I'm getting some looks over here, and so are you. Marie-Christine is a distinguished director of research in social sciences at the French National Research Institute for Sustainable Development since 1982. She's a member of the Local Heritage Environment and Globalization Research Institute and the IPBES. She's an IPBES expert, and she's also now the director of the Agropolis Foundation since 2019. And her research focuses on the links between biodiversity and equity, implemented in the Global South, and notably in coastal zones of West Africa and Vietnam. So we've asked Marie-Christine, based on that very impressive background, to comment and provide some insights into what she's heard today. So I invite you to take the floor, Marie-Christine, please. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, je vais parler en français. Donc, Céline l'a déjà dit, en fait, presque, l'Agropolis Foundation, il y a 4 membres fondateurs, donc le CIRAD, l'IRD, l'Université de Montpellier, l'Institut Agro et l'INRAE. Et effectivement, ce que je voulais souligner, alors d'abord, je voulais remercier pour tous ces témoignages, enthousiasmant, ce travail collaboratif, où on a bien vu qu'on a des valeurs partagées. Et notamment, je retiendrai comme terme, diversité, bien évidemment, tout le monde l'a cité, les notions aussi de équité, notamment l'importance de l'inclusivité. Je reviendrai, alors Madame Marianne, elle n'a pas parlé de désirabilité. Je ne sais pas si on peut dire, il faut qu'on ait un futur qui soit désirable. Elle a montré aussi l'importance que la nourriture, c'est la culture, et qu'il faut, il y a aussi le plaisir de manger, la convivialité des repas. C'est vrai en Afrique, mais ailleurs, moi je suis française, donc c'est quelque chose. Donc ces 3 termes sont vraiment très importants. Et donc je voudrais insister effectivement de la responsabilité de la communauté scientifique pour apporter ces fameuses évidences, surtout dans le contexte actuel d'urgence, d'incertitude, de fausses rumeurs, de scepticisme, donc et sur la complexité finalement des problèmes à résoudre. Et c'est vrai qu'on l'a bien vu aussi, on a différentes définitions de l'agroécologie. Ce sont des pratiques, des savoirs locaux, des principes, mais alors il ne faut pas qu'ils soient trop prescriptifs, parce que justement il faut qu'ils soient flexibles, et que c'est d'abord, effectivement, ça vient d'abord de la base, du local, et c'est bien toute la difficulté de ce transfert du local à l'international, de l'empirisme à une plus grande générosité, complexité, parce qu'aussi c'est un engagement, voire quelquefois un militantisme radical, et puis c'est très complexe parce qu'il faut qu'on réponde au nexus entre les objectifs du développement durable. Et en étant à la CBD, moi j'étais frappée à quel point on n'aborde pas non plus les interrelations, le nexus entre les 3 piliers de la Convention sur la diversité biologique, entre la conservation, qui est très souvent vue comme vraiment la protection, le wilderness, les usages durables, et puis le troisième terme qui est l'équité. Et donc là, on a une responsabilité en tant que scientifique de davantage travailler, de donner des preuves par rapport à ça, de travailler effectivement en termes d'en parler de société transformative, on parle aussi de science transformative, il faut décolonialiser la science, décolonialiser les approches et notamment la formation. Donc, tous les instituts d'agro, justement, qui forment, il y a tout un travail de révolutionner notre manière de faire, effectivement, ces pratiques. Et encore une fois, on est dans un contexte d'urgence et actuellement, c'est d'autant plus important qu'on voit bien qu'il y a un retour en force des discours avec la guerre en Ukraine, avec la crise systémique, en remettant sur le devant de la scène l'importance en disant on ne va pas pouvoir nourrir les milliards de personnes. Et moi, je voudrais vraiment insister. Effectivement, il y a une question de production responsable et plus juste, une question aussi de responsabilité des consommateurs. Si j'avais le temps, je vous raconterais l'histoire de la crevette rose et du poisson bleu, mais j'ai pas le temps. Et puis surtout, de la distribution. Et je pense qu'il faut vraiment dénoncer effectivement cette logique du profit, du libéralisme, et qu'il y a une responsabilité aussi, nous en tant que consommateurs, de savoir les produits qu'on achète, donc arrêter d'acheter, de consommer de la crevette importée qui est produite dans les bassins de crevetticulture au Vietnam, qui se traduisent par une déforestation importée, et qui surtout, le poisson des riches, qui est consommé, que nous consommons en Europe, en Amérique du Nord, et ben c'est au détriment des poissons des pauvres qui n'ont plus accès, puisque en fait les crevettes sont nourries avec la farine de poisson. Donc et on ne peut plus manger le thieboudienne ou le thiebou-kétiar au Sénégal parce que ce poisson, alors ces poissons bleus, les maquereaux, les anchois, tous ces poissons qui sont au bas de la chaîne trophique, qui sont très abondants, donc qui respectent l'environnement, qui sont pas chers, qui sont extrêmement nutritifs, et bien ils sont plus accessibles pour les populations locales parce qu'on le transforme en farine de poisson. Et donc vous voyez l'aberration de ces poissons qui vont traverser de l'Atlantique jusqu'en Asie et qui vont revenir dans nos assiettes. Donc, voilà. Donc, quand on dit effectivement, il faut changer nos modèles à la fois de production, de distribution et de consommation. Et donc, vraiment, j'en appelle effectivement à la responsabilité à la fois de nous tous en tant que citoyens. Et l'autre point sur lequel je voulais souligner, on est effectivement dans une COP, sur des négociations. C'est encore une fois renforcer ce dialogue entre connaissances, politique et société, et écouter effectivement tout le monde. Et je voudrais souligner le fait qu'il y a peut-être des solutions techniques, mais que le problème fondamental, il est vraiment politique et institutionnel pour effectivement ces déséquilibres, cette dissymétrie, ces problèmes aussi de dette écologique. Je sais que pendant la COP, on va beaucoup parler du financement de la biodiversité. On a vu l'échec de la COP15 sur beaucoup d'aspects. Effectivement, ça est aussi un aspect qui est essentiel et qui nous porte à cœur et qu'on partage avec la Global Alliance for the Future of Food. Donc, merci pour tous ces témoignages. Je pense qu'on est ensemble et qu'il faut quand même qu'on continue à batailler ensemble, tous ensemble. Merci.
Thank you very much, Marie-Christine, for those important words, especially the final ones, that we're really all in this together and that we need to work together. And I think, again, 7:30, let's all go to the room and be there in solidarity, right? Before we wrap up, we have one more intervention from a participant from BioVision, who we're very lucky to bring here from the EU. John, I don't know if you're on, John Garcia Ulsa. We're very glad to have you with us. Would you like to go ahead? Hi.
Thank you.
We've
Hi,
never met,
everyone.
But
Thank
it's
you very
lovely to
much.
have you with us.
It's also lovely to be able to join you on this important event, and very happy to all the co-organizers to have made this possible. I just want to echo everything that has been said already by all the participants here. The importance of agroecology for the GBF, the importance to have it explicitly included in the text for Target 10. Perhaps building on what my colleagues have said, I would also like to emphasize that agroecology has the potential to deliver in many other targets to address biodiversity loss drivers worldwide. This includes, for example, the potential to create more better habitats or better ecosystems that can provide habitat connectivity to species that may be endangered, to ecosystems that may be disappearing. The restoration potential of agroecology has to also be recognized by the parties and by by everyone who is making efforts towards increasing restoration activities worldwide. And finally, there is a huge potential for agroecology to contribute to the conservation of wetlands, freshwater ecosystems, because of the emphasis on low chemical inputs in the food systems that agroecology champions. So there is a lot of potential. There is a lot of synergies that could be exploited. I think the conservation community and the ecological community should, if the GBF really includes this explicit recognition of agroecology, this is a building stone or a building block for the two communities to come together and start working on solving some of the issues, of the pressing issues that the planet is facing, including climate change, biodiversity loss, hunger, etc. So yes, my congratulations to everyone who has participated in this event, and let's make it possible for Target 10 to include explicitly agroecology, and a big hug for everyone from Switzerland.
Thank you very much, John. That was very important. We have a few minutes left. I think maybe if we go around the table and give everybody another minute to have their final say, if that's okay. Tammy, I think you have something very urgent that needs to come out. So before you...
it's been wonderful listening to the shared views in the room. I always want to caution that the reason agroecology is successful is because it's place-based, because it's grounded, because it's owned by people and communities and not by governments and other organizations. And I think that point was made very clearly from our colleague from CIRAD. So I think making agroecology more visible to the state will not necessarily make it more successful, and potentially the opposite. And the idea of scaling up is pretty anathema. What we're looking at is scaling out. And we need more farmers, not bigger examples of our kinds of farms. And so having a really strong shared vision, and also a theory of change, which includes that, some of us are prepared to say that we think capitalist economies are the problem, and that if we can develop these alternative and solidarity economies, that's how we'll do this. And don't make us so visible to the state that it destroys what we're doing again. Thanks.
Well put. Thank you for that. Marianne, can I call on you for some final comments, please?
Yeah, thanks everyone for staying till the end. I just want to say the fact that a technology exists does not mean we can use it, and that nutrition is not produced in the lab. And the quest for, running to all these technologies, they have to be questioned. And we've seen that there is ample, coherent evidence that agroecology can feed the world. We don't need to go so far. We don't need any book. You don't even need to do anything. Support the farmers, give them the incentives. I think if the trickle of dollars that have gone to a big organization like AGRA has been given just a fraction to the farmers, I think we'll all be smiling, and we don't even need to do anything. We'll be well fed. Thank you, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Marianne. Saúl, por favor, tú puedes... Sí, gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Sí. Muchísimas gracias. Bueno, creo que ha quedado en este panel, cuando menos, en evidencia la importancia de la agroecología para los temas que nos tienen en esta conferencia de biodiversidad. Pero tiene razón la colega que preguntó al principio, bueno, ¿y cómo podemos hacer? ¿Cómo podemos lograr que en las metas en donde esto se está discutiendo se pueda integrar estos conceptos, estas propuestas, estas iniciativas? Y realmente es todo un desafío, porque, bueno, lo hemos visto ahora también en el día de hoy, los desencuentros que existen en los temas que a nosotros nos interesan. De pronto los gobiernos o los representantes de delegaciones están también en otro tema. El día de ayer nosotros propusimos teníamos una propuesta desde el Foro Internacional Indígena de Biodiversidad para que dentro del marco hubiera una salvaguarda, un párrafo de salvaguarda que dijera que nada en lo contenido en este marco de biodiversidad significa menoscabar o suprimir los derechos que los pueblos indígenas tienen actualmente o puedan tener en el futuro. Y al parecer, una delegación lo presentó y no lo encorchetaron o lo encorchetaron, pero no hubo más discusión. Y a otra delegación le pregunté, ¿vamos bien? Me dice, no, más bien creo que sus pleitos están en otros temas. Entonces, no es la agroecología el tema en donde están. Parece que están en otros temas. Y eso, pues, puede ser difícil o puede ser preocupante, pero a lo mejor puede ser una oportunidad que nos permita que si ese no es el pleito, a lo mejor puede quedar. Así es que yo lo que los insto es que donde estemos podemos ir planteando en la meta 10, en la meta 18, y nosotros desde pueblos indígenas en la meta 3, en la meta 20, 21 y 22 estamos hoy, y por supuesto en la sección B bis y el objetivo C. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. And thank you for raising the BBIS as one of the final comments. I think that's really important. Sabrina, if I could ask you to provide us with a couple of closing comments, and then Lauren, if you have one final thought, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison, and thank you so much to all the speakers today and bringing out everything and, you know, speaking about agroecology and the need for that within the GBF. I think for us who always push for seed sovereignty, food sovereignty, we acknowledge that there's a lot of work that is being done by communities at the local level. I think as many of the speakers have shared. And we continue to push for this recognition. We continue to push for this support. It may not happen at the international level, at the CBD, because we've had many fights over the years. And even in the COP15, there was a big fight or push for agroecology, and we didn't see anything happening. So these fights we might not realize them today or tomorrow at the global level, but we continue to push for this shift towards, you know, just sound, ecological, friendly agricultural practices such as agroecology, and we'll continue to do that. When it comes to legislation, we are seeing small shifts, small exemptions, but for us, it's the need to push for discrete regimes that recognize farmers' rights, that recognize, farmer managed systems, that recognize agroecology. I think, Lauren, you spoke about the relationship between NBSAPs and NDCs, but also we need to see relationships not just with NDCs, but also across all sectors, and realizing that, you know, agriculture as a key sector has to also incorporate issues around agroecology, and it has to feature in there. So I think for me, I think the fight is still on. The push for these shifts is still happening. Lots of work is being done at the ground, and we need to continue to support whatever way we can to push for these shifts, either at the legislative level, from the national, regional, and ultimately at the international level. Thank you.
I just wanted to elevate this theme that so many people have talked about, which is the kind of deeper structural change that we require, and that we need to reimagine, you know, the institutions and the ways that we do things in fundamentally different way. It has to be, they need to evolve in fundamentally different ways and be recreated in fundamentally different ways, from research to the way we think about evidence and, you know, problematize evidence, to the institutional and political structures. And where we see hope and find inspiration is in these initiatives that are really all around us and are, recreating this new way of being in the world very clearly. And so, again, just to echo what you've said, is really make sure that we're grounding this conversation in the real work that's happening in communities around the world.
Thank you, Lauren. And we're just at time now. Unfortunately, this is such a rich conversation, but we've just scratched the surface. I'd like to thank the people who brought this event together, in particular, Faris Ahmed. And also Amanda Di Battista. And Erica, who's been back in Toronto helping us out, or in Waterloo, and also Mateus, who's online as well. So thanks to all of you. Thanks to the sponsors. Thank you very much to our panelists. You have inspired all of us in this room to go on and help make change happen. Now we are armed with more stories that are more compelling, so we can make an even bigger change together. And the audience, thank you for being here, because you're part of that change, and we all need to work together to make this happen. So go out, do the best you can with this meeting, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you very much.